Good evening, everyone. My name is John Tays, and I'm the event coordinator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are, of course, gathered here in Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Innuit, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. We have a very exciting event for you this evening, so I will not take up too much of your time up here. We're so very pleased that you could all be here with us tonight as we celebrate and welcome acclaimed best-selling author Jón Kalman Stefansson here to the store to discuss his exceptional book, Your Absence is Darkness, translated by Philip Roughton. You may applaud at his presence. Now, as with any Icelandic adjacent book, the moment we reached out to the community, we had an outpouring of immediate support and interest in this event. So we're so very grateful to all of our partners who helped make this evening a reality. First of all, we're enormously grateful, of course, to the publisher of this book, Biblioasis, who did all the heavy lifting of figuring out how we could bring Stefansson to this country and for setting up his tour. And of course, for publishing this book in the first place. We're also very grateful to our partners at the Icelandic Canadian Frón, Lögberg-Heimskringla, and of course, the Consulate General of Iceland here in Winnipeg. Before I will be going over some housekeeping notes and offering a brief biographical introduction to both of these folks, but I'm just going to call up two of our partners one by one just to offer a few words of greeting and welcome. First, I would like to call up the Consul General, Wilhelm to say a few words.
Góða kvöldið. Það er mjög gaman að vera hérna og sjá ykkur öll og bjóða velkomin íslenskan rithöfund. So good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here and welcoming one of my countrymen, an Icelandic author. Icelanders, we are very proud of our literary heritage. We started writing books long before anyone thought that you should write books. And we're very proud that we still do this. We still have authors that are of significance, not just in Iceland, but also in other countries. And we are actually amazed at how popular our authors are. We almost feel jealous of them, because they're sort of, are other countries stealing them away from us? Yeah, it's a privilege to be here, and it's very nice to meet Jón Kalman. Actually, people say that Icelanders, everyone knows each other. I've actually never met him before, so it's a great day for me as well as for you. So Jón Kalman, welcome to Winnipeg, and I hope you all enjoy this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Consul William. I will now call up Lisa Johansson Maloney of the Icelandic Canadian Frón at the Scandinavian Cultural Center, who have been such fantastic partners.
Hi, nice to meet you. Welcome. Hello, everybody. I won't take up too much of your time. It is a true honor to be here tonight as we gather to celebrate the remarkable Jón Kalman Stefansson and his book, Your Absence is Darkness. As an Icelandic Canadian, I feel a deep connection to both our cultures. The ties between Iceland and Canada run deep, rooted in shared history, migration, and enduring appreciation for the arts. This bond is especially evident in the vibrant Icelandic community here in Winnipeg, which has flourished over many, many years and generations. Jón's writing is a beautiful reflection of this connection. In Your Absence is Darkness, he masterfully explores the complexities of absence, how it shapes our experiences and influences our relationships. His poetic prose invites us to reflect on the space between us, reminding us that absence can often illuminate what is most precious. At the Icelandic Canadian Frón, we celebrate these ties through various cultural programs that honor our heritage. Through programs, we strive to promote Icelandic culture and foster connections between our communities. We believe that by sharing stories, music, and art, we can strengthen the bonds that unite us and create a deeper understanding of our shared narratives. I'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to McNally Robinson for hosting this event. Your dedication to literature and community engagement is invaluable. It creates a space where authors like Jón can share their work and where readers can connect with profound stories that resonate to us all. So on behalf of the Icelandic Canadian Frón, I send our warmest greetings and express our gratitude to all of you for being here to celebrate this artistry. May tonight inspire us to reflect on the stories that shape our lives and connections to that enrich our communities. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Just to give you a brief sense of how this evening will play out, there will be a conversation that'll take place in these chairs to my left, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions from the audience. I will circulate with this handheld microphone once you've put up your hand, so please do allow those questions to percolate. This is not because we don't trust you to project your voice, it just ensures your questions may be heard by those watching the live stream tonight. And now I will get out of your way after introducing tonight's participants. Your host for this evening is my boss, so I have to be pleasant while introducing him. That is Chris Hall, who has been with McNally Robinson Booksellers for more than 25 years, more than 10 of which as owner. When he isn't reading or walking, he loves to travel and cook. He lives in Winnipeg and is currently training his daughters to be booksellers. Our guest of honor this evening, Jón Kalman Stefánsson. His novels have been nominated 3 times for the Nordic Council Prize for Literature, and his novel, Summer Light and Then Comes the Night, received the Icelandic Prize for Literature in 2005. In 2011, he was awarded the prestigious P.O. Enquist Award. He is perhaps best known for his trilogy, Heaven and Hell, The Sorrow of Angels, which was longlisted for the Independent Foreign Fiction Prize, and The Heart of Man, winner of the Oxford-Weidenfeld Translation Prize. A subsequent novel, Fish Have No Feet, was longlisted for the Man Booker International Prize in 2017. Please give an enormous round of applause for Chris Hall and Jón Kalman Stefansson.
Welcome to McNally Robinson.
Thanks.
And welcome to Winnipeg.
Yeah, thanks.
So I noticed Winnipeg makes an appearance in your book.
Yeah.
Gisla's brother has emigrated to Winnipeg, works as an undertaker.
Yeah.
Which, of course, he works as an undertaker in this novel. So what do you know about Winnipeg? You said you had never been here, right?
No. Hi. So nice to be here. No, I've never been in Winnipeg or in Canada, but you know, it's especially I think Winnipeg is part of our history. So it's always circling around in your head, and I read a lot of things about this when people were moving here to Canada. It was a big thing in Iceland, obviously, and some were very unhappy about it. There was even a very famous poet in the end of the 9th or the beginning of the 20th century, I think, who wrote a poem trying to stop people from going to Canada. And it starts like, "Ert á förum, elsku vinur," are you going away, dear friend? And you know, he was one of the most famous poets at that time, very, very popular. So I don't know, maybe he stopped someone, but it was. I mean, it's a huge thing in our history.
Well, I think there's a lot of Icelandic descent in the room here. Does anyone here count themselves as Icelandic descent? I told you.
So you know, I'm glad that this poem didn't stop people.
I count myself among them. I have my great-grandparents were from Iceland. So I'm going to dive right into this book, as you kind of do. You get going right off the bat. Very early, there's a scene in the churchyard. The narrator, who finds himself where he doesn't know very much, finally meets a woman. They sit down, and there's a tombstone with a quote from Kierkegaard. And then I started your other novel, The Summer Light and Then Comes Night, and it opens up with a town who isn't very unique, But the one thing it has that no other town, well, actually, what it doesn't have that every other town has is a church or a churchyard. And then several times in this novel, Kierkegaard translates as churchyard. So you open both books with Kierkegaard.
Yeah, well, he's Søren Kierkegaard. He's famous Danish philosopher and one of the biggest name ever in Denmark. And he's a great mind, but very colorful person. And he has, for years been circling around in my life, partly because who he is or was or what he wrote, but also that the sister of my mother, she translated one of his books, and she loves to talk about him with me. So he became, part of my life. But it was rather late that I discovered the obvious if you know Danish, that his name literally means churchyard. And that's a hell of a name to have.
It's true. So is there any of his philosophy that informed some of what you do in the book, or is
no,
it
I'm too stupid for that.
Yeah. So you're the narrator, who I referred to being a bit out of sorts. We discovered fairly early on he's amnesiac. He doesn't remember anything. And I was reading a review of the book that as a reader you enter a book kind of like an amnesiac, because you don't know anything. Everything has to be filled in. And I was reading an interview with you where you say when you enter a book, you don't really know what it is and what you're going. Is there an element of amnesiac for you?
Well, but when I start a new novel, I seldom know where I am heading. And if I think I know, then I find out that that's not true. And I sometimes say that I have never written the book I was going to write. And I hope I will never do that, because that would be a very bad book. Because writing for me is to discover something unexpected, something that I've never thought about. And it's a thrill, thing, writing, and it's always something popping up that you didn't know that you knew, or characters who you don't know where they come from, and you discover all kinds of stories and destiny and etc., and that you didn't know when you start to write it. And very often when I, in the end of the working day, when I'm writing the first draft, I always write down, 1 pages or something about what I'm going to write the day after. And then I sit down the day after with this page and I start. But very often something unexpected pops up, a character or scene or something, and I'm totally gone, and lose control over everything. And that's one of the best things, that you don't have control over what you're doing. And therefore, I sometimes say that an author or artist, they are able to create something that is much bigger than them, and much wiser and deeper. And therefore, people are often very disappointed when they meet the artist and they don't feel the thing that they have been reading, or so we are a bit fake.
You're just making it up as you go along.
Mostly.
Yeah.
I just try to follow the flow, And I know, there are all kinds of authors. Some authors can, in fact, organize, but I'm not one of them. And I learned that very early when I started to write, that I'm that kind of writer who just have to trust this inner flow that starts while I start to write, and I'm very glad when very unexpected things comes up, and when I surprised myself, and for me, the art of the novel is the art of unexpected thing, and I mean you can't, if you can organize the unexpected thing, where is the unexpected?
And well, maybe this is associated then, because there's a section, I mean, it's several sections, but the same story of Gudrun and Petter. And it's a very, I mean, if you had only written that as a novel, it would be fairly conventional historical novel. And in fact, another review I was talking about said that was their favorite part. And I can see why. It's got the comfort of third person omniscience. It's kind of what we think of as realism when we read. But then we realized that actually this section has been written by your amnesiac narrator who's under the influence of maybe a priest, maybe a devil as his muse. So that's what's going on there. You kind of disrupt in the way you're saying, or like what stops you from just writing that conventional historical novel?
Because it's not in my blood. I would die of boredom writing. But when I started to write novels, and it become rather sudden, because I thought I was a poet, and I never dreamt of writing novels. But in my first novel was published in 1996, and that novel came, after I read a famous novel, Danish novel, Herverk by Tom Christensen, and that influenced me so heavily. Its power was so strong that I just had to sit down and try to write a novel. And I mean, it took time. It took 3 years or something to find my tone, and it was not very pleasant always while I was finding my tone. But then I realized and discovered that I'm not capable of writing, traditional novel. It's because I don't think like that, and I'm always trying to add something to the novel. I mean, to the form or expand it, and having for me, it's very important how you tell the story, from its point of view, and etc. Because that's, for me, almost the main point. And as I sometimes said, you can have the very best story ever in your hand, and you can write it in such a way that it's very boring, and nobody read it, and then you can have a story which is about almost nothing, that you can write it in that way. It seems like it's about everything. Knut Hamsun, who was Norwegian author, very, very good, one of the very best ever. His style was such that he could write about nothing, and you have a feeling that he's writing about everything in your life. So for me, the story itself, of course, important, but there's so many other things. There's the style and the point of view, who was telling the story, and the structure of the novel, etc., etc. So for me, it's writing novel. You have so many possibilities. So it's for me, it's shame not try to use them. I'm nothing against novels that are purely plain story. It's fine and great to read, but it's I can't write a story like that or a book like that.
It's interesting you bring up poetry because it made me think of poetry. This novel, and then there's an opening kind of paragraph, maybe call it a prologue. It stands alone on the very first page, and you kind of tell us what the themes are. It's deep feelings, difficult experiences, trauma, intense happiness, hardship that cuts so deep it lasts for generations, memories that are passed from life to life. And I think these are the moments in life when we don't have words, when you're rendered speechless, when you don't know what to say. And I think of poetry, that the poets who somehow they can grapple with these, but poets know when to stop. They know when the white of the page is better than another word. And I thought the way I was reading this novel, you undermine all of the storytelling rules, I guess. You undermine your point of view, you undermine the structure, you undermine the plot in ways that open it up, I think, in the way you can get deep. Is there a comparison there?
Well, I am a poet who writes novels, and I think that I think as a poet. I look at the world as a poet, and I think that influences everything that I do, and I use without thinking that I use poetry while writing. It's something that I just do without thinking. It's just my music, and in poetry it's the deepest form. Music and poetry, there's the form that can grasp everything, and I'm always so surprised and sad that there are so few people who read poetry, because they are, of course, some people have difficulty to connect with poetry, and that's sad, but it's just like that. But I think that people believes that poetry is difficult or hard, which is bullshit. Of course, some poets are difficult, in that sense that you have to read them again and again to understand what they are meaning. But there are so many poets that open up, when you start to read, like the Polish poet Szymborska, which is you have to read her. She's very clear style with almost no metaphoric or and very simple language. But when you read one of her poems, it's like she's describing everything. And you can read a poem that takes you maybe half a minute to read, or 1 minute, and it stays with you for the rest of your life. And I think that's something that because we are always talking about spending our time wisely and etc. Half a minute or 1 minute, and you have something that will travel with you for the rest of your life, a companion or something to think about. So I think if people would read more poetry, they would be not happy. Poetry are not meant to make people happy, but to understand themselves better, or to understand life better. Because when you read poetry, sometimes times almost stops, and you can hear your heartbeat, and you can hear the heartbeat of the world. And that's, experience that is for me always a bliss.
It's very personal too, that a poem speaks to you, maybe, and doesn't speak to somebody else. But I always find a poem that really works leaves space for you as a reader. And that's what I think I'm trying to get at is you respond to it, you fill in some of the blanks somehow, or maybe you do some of the work.
Good poetry and also good novels, they in a way turn the reader into a poet or into a writer, because they, this things between the lines, this is so important. I mean, I have nothing against crime fiction. They're fine, and good people are reading them, and they are entertain you and etc. But they usually lack these things, because if they had something between the lines, then people would be annoyed, because when you're reading a crime fiction, you just want to drive through with 100 kilometers by hours and entertain yourself. But some novels and poetry, they give you something. They give you something unexpected, and very often, they give you something that you don't realize while you're reading, but it comes back later, and they open up your mind and make you think or see the world in a slightly different way, and that's the thing I have always tried to do in my writing, to affect the reader, to go deep into it, and in that hope that I will be able to, well, not change the life of the reader, but at least to matter, and to make him or her see the world and the surrounding in a slightly different way, and comfort them and entertain them and make them laugh and everything. For me, novels and fiction and poetry should matter. It should matter. It should matter to the reader, and it should make change something, move the reader.
Yeah, well, you're using crime fiction as an example, right, of third-person omniscient storytelling, whereas as a reader, you kind of just get to relax and find out what happens next, and you can be thinking about things. But when you write what you write, which I would think of as more art, entertainment is fine. I read for entertainment all the time, but what you're describing now is in your books is more art, where you're trying to get deeper or say something unsayable.
Well, I know what you're talking about, but I never understood this, concept, difficult literature or hard reading. For me, it's either you can tune into the book or you cannot. Either it's book for you or not, and that doesn't necessarily say something about the book or you as a reader, but it is to read is so wonderful thing, because it's just you and the book, and it's you with in your own company, and then you enter a world and you're meeting a lot of people, you're traveling, and etc. etc. So to read is an adventure, and you can have your opinion on a book, and it doesn't matter what other things about it. You can think, you can say, take, some books that are praised, and you can say it's nothing for me. I don't see anything in it. And you were right. You were right, because it's you who are talking. So that's one of the beauty with novels and poetry, that no one has the same opinion of the book. You know, like my novels, when they are read, nobody experienced exactly the same thing. And then also when they are translated, they change a bit. I mean, my books in English are not exactly the same as a book in French or Danish or Italian or whatever. And I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I do too. I think of the bookstore, that we each take our own journey through the bookstore. Even if you and I were to read the same books in the same order, we wouldn't get the same things out of it.
No, because you know, it's because you, the reader, meet the book with its life, the feelings, memories, and so the books, you know, good books, that they talk differently with everyone.
Maybe we lighten it up with talking about music. Music is obviously very important to this novel. There's a deaths playlist and a list in the back. It's on Spotify, and I was listening to it as in the last couple of weeks. Why was it so important to you to include music?
You know, music has always been important to me, and I think in almost all my books, and you know, it's you know, I come from on my mother's side there was a lot of musicians there, and so I think it's in my blood, and I have always listened to music very much, and always do, constantly trying to find, you know, learn to listen to new music, and etc. And it's affect me a lot, you know, in my writing, and while I'm writing, there are always, very often, you know, some songs or piece of music just pops up, and it's like they, you know, not force the way in, but they just, you know, they come in, you know, like you know, they just walk in the story, and demand to be part of it, and sometimes they change the scene, you know, because, you know, song can change its surrounding with the, you know, with the feelings that evokes while you're listening, etc. And yeah, but sometimes they just comes without thinking. But sometimes I have to, you know, I'm describing, you know, this and that, and people are listening to the music, and so I have to pick a song. And that's often very, you know, it's fun. Both picking a good song and a very bad song, and you know, tormenting myself by listening to terrible song, but I feel terrible, and you know, because both the song, it says what's about the character who's listening to it, and then you add a new you know, dimension in the book, because the reader maybe recognize some of the song, and the song start to play in its head, and all kinds of memories comes to you. So it's, you know, it's open up unexpected door in the reader, and then if they don't know the song, then I hope that they will listen to it, because music is so important, and good song can, you know, do so much for you, and if people have read my book and learn new songs, then, their life are, bigger after that. And it's always also, great pleasure if I can put an Icelandic song in, makes me very glad to think of, some obscure Icelandic song that someone in Europe or in Canada, discovered it. But it's just like with the characters that, you can't choose whatever song you like. It have to fit in. If I try to force some song in, then the characters just said, no, I will not put this song on. I know you like the song, but I will not put it on. So I don't control over my character. I sometimes kill them, but that's my only control I have over them.
That's true. And you refuse to put the Bee Gees on this.
Yeah, well, I'm very sorry to say, but I have never liked Bee Gees.
What was your narrator? Wasn't you?
Yeah, well, I sometimes I agree with the narrator.
I wondered if to go back to that opening paragraph with those heavy, the big life experiences, both bad and good.
But
do we use songs to?
Firstly, I disagree. Heavily.
Oh,
heavy.
Okay, sure.
For me, I've never understood since I was a kid why it's heavy or serious or to talk about death or meaning of life or whatever. For me, it's because it's so big part of everything. So in a way, of course, death is a serious thing, but it's also a very common thing.
It's true.
And everybody dies, so it's no news.
No.
And so it's for me, it's both to write and talk about. It's just like talk about coffee or something. I mean it's when I write about it or talk about it, I'm not it's in my mind it's not serious. It's just part of the circle of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk about everything, and I can't leave anything out.
Well, I was struck by joy is a big thing. There's lots of big things. It's positive end.
Joy is a big thing in life.
Yeah, absolutely. The joy of a puppy gets mentioned a few times. But do you think we go to music when love songs and is that we go to music or songs instead of poetry maybe to cope with or to help experience or help with words to these experiences?
It's much easier to go to music because you just have to put it on and listen to it but of course then sometimes you get both some kind of poetry and music like with if the words are very good, but it's a different thing because when you read poetry, as I said, it's different than from reading novels because it's like when you're reading a novel, it's just you and the novel and the characters, but you go in and there's some kind of flow. And so you can dive in with the poems. It's you're standing together, and you are discovering something together. So it's a more like it's nothing sacred or something. I mean, you can read poetry on the toilet or wherever on the bus. It's nothing sacred. It's just so damn great, and it can be so deep, and it can be so fun also, and because the poets, the best of them, they bend both the language and the time, and it's like they can change the words into music, So when you read very good poem, you are also listening to the music of the language.
You've got a great line about music that I liked. Life without music is no life. It's just poverty and heavy, wet snowstorms. I could relate to that even more. So you and I seem to have similar reading tastes. I was about 2/3 into this novel, and I was getting a feeling like I had many years ago in another novel where I felt lost, where I didn't know who was speaking necessarily, what was happening. And then Schooley lies down on the couch and opens Master and Margarita, Kyle Bulgakov. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's the book I was thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the best books I've ever written.
I agree. Can you tell us about it, or what's your experience of it?
Of
Master and Margarita.
Yeah, you know, I was lucky. I read it when I was young.
Me too.
And I think that's one of the books that it's you know, best if you can read it when you're young. But you know, if you miss that, then it's quite all right. You can read it wherever. But it's you know, one of the books that you know, you have a feeling that it's everything is possible in a book, and it opens up, you know, and breaks down boundaries between lives and death, and religion and life, and etc. And it's fun. It's very critical, and because there are very few authors who can write about politics. Because you have to, you know, I have read so many novels that where, you know, politics are discussed or a part of the theme or the plot, and sometimes you have a feeling that the opinion of the author is in the way. That it's, you know, that the political view is not part of the flow. It's forced in, and then you have ruined the novel. But there are very few who can do it, who can write books that are very political, and the best of them, like Master and Margarita by Bulgakov. It's very political. It was then, and it's still. It's like George Orwell, you know, he could do it also. So there are very few who have this skill or talent to write about the politics of your time, but still you're writing about the politics of all time. And you know, there's two things that are most difficult to write about. It's politics and erotic. You know, tick. And it's exactly the same with erotic. It has to be in the flow. It has to, when you read it, then you think, yeah, of course, it has to be there. It's, you know, obviously, you know, you can't avoid that. But sometimes you read a book and there's a scene, erotic scene, and you have the feeling that it's more either that the author is trying to, you know, get the reader's attention, or, you know, the author himself is just a bit horny when he was writing it, and it's fine. But you know, if you feel that, then it's ruined. Then, you know, it's fine for the author to write such a scene if he has this urge to do it, but if it don't fit, you have to take it out.
I'm very aware that this crowd probably has some questions for you, so we're going to get to that. But before we do, Biblioasis published this book in Canada. I'm a great admirer of them. They have a new to us book coming in February called Heaven and Hell. It's not a new book in your repertoire, but can you tell us what to expect from it?
Yeah, Heaven and Hell is the first book in trilogy. It was published 2007 in Iceland, and it took place around 1900 in the Westfjord of Iceland. Westfjord is, as you probably know, the most beautiful place on the planet, and so it's a kind of historical novel, but I didn't want to write a historical novel at that time, and because the form of the historical novel is very dangerous. It's often just wiped out the author, and if you read historical novel, they often looks alike because the form is so, cruel. But so one of the main things there was to find a way to tell the story, because I wanted to have both the voices of that time, but also of my own time, and I couldn't, often in that case, author finds or come with some storyteller who are very old and is telling his memory or something, but it was not convincing to have 130-year-old man or woman telling a story. So I was, I had some trouble with that, but then the solution just came to me, as often, just without thinking, that those who are telling the story they lived in that time, and then they died, but they were not allowed to pass away over to the land of the dead. So they cling to life, and they tell, it is a group of people, seems to be a group of people, and they seems to tell the stories, because they hope if they do it that well, they will be freed. So they can move on, and so the storytellers are both in our time and in the past, and it started a small boat with 6 men goes out into the ocean to fish, and one of the young men, he forgets his coat, and that's a serious thing when you're out in the ocean. You get your coat, and then the weather starts to be, the wind starts to blow, and etc., etc. So, things start to happen, and when I was writing the book, when I started, I was convinced that it would become just one book, and this paragraph or this description of the man in the boat is just in my mind, just 10 pages, sometimes a prologue, and then would the real story start. But then, without knowing it, I wrote 60 pages, 70 pages, just about that, the man in the boat. And then I realized I have a new story in my hand, and the story I was planning to write is just vanished. And I realized it will be, at least 2 books. And then when I was in the middle of the book number 2, the Sorrow of Angel, I realized that I had to write 3 books. And when I was in the middle of the book number 3, I was terrified because I feared that it would be 4th book. But I managed to finish it, and though very often, both in Iceland and Europe, I'm asked when I will write the 4th book, because people want to, but I always answer that the only one who can write the 4th book is the reader. I have done my job.
You certainly have. Well, we look forward to that. That's in early February. We'll have lots of copies. We'll be featuring it, so look forward to reading it. So I will turn it over to the audience. I think I'm going to guess they have some questions. John? Anyone have any questions?
Oh, thank you. My name is Harold Brownson. I read the trilogy that you wrote first before reading this one. And then I read the one that you're going to speak on tonight, and one that you have. And I just have to compliment you. And going through this, it doesn't take long before a reader starts to recognize that the writer is a poet. There's so many lovely sentences in the works that you write that a person has to think, sit down, or basically stop and think about what you said, what the sentence was, because they're profound. So I want to congratulate you on that, and say I look forward to reading other books that you write, and I encourage other people to read this one. The first one, Heaven and Hell, is a trilogy. Starts off with two young men, actually a boy and a student, carrying a book, and an English author's book, and it was so dear to them. And this is where I think, love of literature comes through. And again, I kept stopping as I went through there because there were so many lines that I just loved. So I have to compliment you on that, and I encourage others that are here, because you said that you're going to have delivery of Heaven and Hell. Please buy them and read them. You'll enjoy them if you have any interest, as everybody here would have, in literature. And as I read a lot of novels, and I enjoy novels, a lot of thrillers. But when I was reading through the first one, Heaven and Hell, I said, this isn't a novel that I'm used to. This is literature. This is real literature. And I greatly appreciated that. So that when I found that you were going to be here this evening, I wanted to come here and congratulate you. So I enjoyed that. This is something I seldom do too. I read the trilogy a second time. I normally don't read books a second time because I remember them. But it was very, very enjoyable to do that. Now, the one that you're talking about here tonight, your absence is darkness. That's a line of poetry to me. It's just beautiful. It's a lovely title for a novel. And the novel is so nice, and there are so many elements there I saw in the first trilogy where you have to stop and think, that is a lovely thought. Let me think about it. So I read that book a second time as well, very unusual for me. The way it starts off, it's very nice between Haraldur and Vigdís. You tell a lovely, lovely story there. It's emotional. As is the story you tell about what's her name? Guðríður, yes. Same thing. You look forward to more information about her as you go through the story, and you always look forward to that. Well, I'm not going to say too much about the story, about my reading or anything like this, but I just wanted to come here to congratulate you on your excellence as a writer and encourage others to read more about what you've written.
Just thank you for the very kind word, but we have to also remember that it's translated wonderfully by Philip. He is a genius.
I'm a very non-speaker. I just have to say that Haraldur, I'm reading their book after you. It's not I have to read it again because I haven't. When your books are translated from Icelandic to English or something, are you always happy with it? Do you find you know how to, like, I really can't explain how it's, I can't say it in English even. It's totally different from Icelandic. I'm not sure if you make sense. Yeah.
No, it's, I never read my own books.
Oh.
I write them and I don't have to read them. And because there are so many wonderful books that I want to read, so I don't want to spend time in my own books. And I don't have time to read over
like criticize or?
Yeah, because I can read over, I read English, Danish, Norwegian, but I don't have time to do that. But I trust my translator, of course. I guess some of them are better than others, but many of my translators are brilliant. But it's always, when you translate a book, you always miss something. But if the translators are good, you gain something also, because the languages are always, there are always some difference between them. Like French from Icelandic and etc. So the translator has to, he just has to change something, because you can't translate literally. You have to, the translator himself has to be some kind of poet, and he has to master his own language more than the language he is translating from.
Conversational, like writing the conversations that happen in your books. I know that's not easy. Like you talked a bit about the process that you use to just generally write, but the challenge of making the conversation come alive, feel like it's an actual conversation two people would have. How in the world do you do that? What's your process?
There is no process. I'm rather simple person, so I have no process. It's always the same. It's like you're playing an instrument. You just sit down with your piano or the guitar and you start the song, and you feel and you can hear if you are striking the right notes or making the right atmosphere. And it's just in my blood that it comes in a way naturally. Of course, you have to work on things and etc. But they're very seldom that the characters say something that don't fit them. And if they do, they just turn to me and say, no, I never talk like that. You have to do better. So they criticize me a lot. So they help me. So I'm not doing it alone.
So we do have time for 2 more questions. We'll just take these 2 folks right here.
Hi. You mentioned that you're a poet who writes novels, and that your poetry kind of affects your approach to how you write your novel. I was just wondering if now that you are writing novels, if that has affected the way that you approach poetry now, if that has changed at all.
You mean my own poetry, or?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I published 3 books of poetry last century, 200 years ago, and then it's just stopped. When partly because I was not content with what I was doing then, and there was some crisis for me, and then I went into the prose, and it's just took everything over. I used poetry in my writing. I'm a novelist, but writing poetry is it's disappeared. And it's like the poems were punishing me, and because it's I can sit down and start to write novels, and it just comes. But poetry is different. It's like having a cat and a dog. The novels are the dog. They just follow you, and you can say sit and etc. And you try to say sit with a cat, it just go away. And so poems are like the cats. They just come when they want to. But then suddenly, some years ago, I don't know, 7 years ago, then suddenly something opens up, inside me, and they just float out. And so I published a book of poetry, 4 years ago or something, 5 years ago, and I'm still writing poetry. And I think I write it differently than before. And because, I'm a novelist writing poetry. But I'm very happy that they are back to me.
I'm not going to say you're a gifted author, obviously, but it's really strange how this poetry has come to be, because that's my question. So there's something going on here, because when you talked about poetry, I was very drawn to it. So not to tell you what to do, but I think you should really revisit that. And there's something about you and poetry, I think, that is powerful. And you maybe give yourself that chance to really explore your gift for poetry. And I would be really interested in reading what you have published, but I encourage you to really deep down explore poetry and give us some poetry, please.
Well, like I said, it's the cats will just come, but but it's also fascinating that you can you can't call to it. It just comes, and it's like for the last half year or something, I've been writing poems. After I have visited some places like Svalbard, this fabulous place in the far north, or when I went to Corsica or something, then just something happened, and I just sat down and wrote a long poem, like a maniac, and it's great, but I have no control over it. I wish, or no, it's fine like that. But I don't know if they will translate it to English, but because you have to talk with my publisher.
I'll turn things over to you folks for any closing comments you might have, and then I'll review signing procedure.
Well, speaking of your Canadian publisher, before we finish, I just want to give a shout out to Biblioasis. They are one of the small Canadian presses who put out really good books. They don't have the marketing to tell you about them very well. We try to help them out. They're worth paying attention to. Biblioasis is one of the best. I think when you read by algorithm and you take your recommendations from algorithm, you're going to get another book just like the one you read. A really good bookseller and a really good publisher will give you something different and take you to a different place and from a different person, and it's really worthwhile. And this is the kind of book that they will publish. So just a shout out to them and a thanks to them for sending Jón our way. And thank you, Jón. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the knowledge.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much, and thank all of you for your questions and for your attention this evening. We will be moving along to the signing portion of this evening, so in just a moment we will transport Jón from that seat to this one. There will be one brief moment of beautiful chaos while everybody gets in line down here, and then please do feel free to come up and have any of these books signed. Please do feel free to have them signed before you pay for them. Just please do visit my colleagues at the cash desk before you leave. We're so incredibly grateful to Lögberg-Heimskringla, the Icelandic Canadian Frón, the Consulate General of Iceland here in Winnipeg, Biblioasis Books, of course, for making this evening a possibility, and thank you all for being here. Please join me one final time in giving a very warm welcome, or thank you. Offer some gratitude to Chris Hall and Jón Kalman Stefansson. Have a wonderful evening.